Whoops.
Well,
So
my
let me
question.
kick it off here. Welcome, because
Oh
we
yeah.
like to talk to all the folks that are going to watch this on YouTube. That's really what we're doing this for, is the clicks and the views and the likes. So welcome to 2022. The agenda for today a bit sparse. All of us are kind of getting back into the swing of things from some PTO, but Trevor really wanted us to talk about Helm, so we're going to kick things off with that.
Yeah, I'm really curious about sort of usage of our Helm charts, like which ones are being used and by how many people, and then specifically around the enterprise Helm chart offering. Um, I kind of would like, so now we have two Loki Helm charts. There's the full microservices and the simple scalable. And then we have one enterprise one, which is based on the full microservices. I am kind of wondering if we can change the enterprise one to be based off the simple scalable, with the idea being that it's easier. But I'm not really sure who's using what and if that would break everyone and what people feel about it. Um, anyways, that was my question.
Um, let me make this conversation more complicated.
Great.
I Perry's not here, and this should definitely go on here, but just before the end of the year, we upstreamed a Loki operator that Red Hat built. It's a general purpose Kubernetes operator for Loki. It's the API is designed around basically specifying a size. Like I think the size that there's only one size that exists right now. It's like called something like X1 small, and it will, you provide that as the input to the, the custom resource, and then you will get a Loki deployment in microservices mode with the number of distributors, ingesters, and queryers for that size, which correlates to a amount of volume of logs per day or something like that. So it's Red Hat's investment in this was to make it easy to run Loki in OpenShift. The operator is not OpenShift specific, though. It has some flags you can provide to it that will allow it to get some additional features out of OpenShift, but it will run in any Kubernetes environment. So so thank you to Perry and the folks that put a tremendous amount of work into that, and then were gracious enough to contribute it to the project, hoping for basically larger adoption to build a community around it to support it. And now we have this question of, you know, should we, and I don't know that we can necessarily answer this question today because we haven't had a lot of talk about this internally yet, but how could we use this operator in conjunction with the Helm charts also, right? Like Helm chart can deploy an operator. We could remove most of the Helm charts and replace them with this that deploys the operator. Likewise, should the operator now be updated to support the single, SSD deployment model? Like, what is compelling about that is because the API for the operator is this like X1 small, it could be X1 SSD, right? And what's nice about operators is you could say make a change between X1 SSD to X1 small, and it could actually do the things to convert from an SSD to a microservices deployment. These are things you can't do in Helm very easily, or JSON for that matter very easily, right? Like you'd have to manually sort of figure out how to apply that so that you get the deployment in a non-breaking way, but that can be codified in the operator. So so I'm going to answer your question by creating more complexity, which is I don't know what we should do with all of our Helm charts. We have a lot. They're largely community maintained. We just introduced the one that you're working on, Trevor, for SSD. And I think we got to have a kind of sit down and decide of where do we want to put our efforts. The Helm charts are not high maintenance per se, but they're, being that it's Helm, it is some ways high maintenance because lots of people come along with a use case of something that we've not templated, and then there's a PR, and like that's so it's a matter of just keeping track and merging PRs. And like as the folks at Grafana, we don't get a lot of time because we don't use Helm ourselves, so we're going to start discussions around whether or not the operator makes sense for us to use. We famously use the JSON deployment, and that's
so that was going to be my follow-up question, Ed, is that if I would have no interest in creating a Helm chart that deploys the operator if we at Grafana Labs were not interested in starting to use the operator, right? Because then we've now increased the surface area of things to support, basically, right? Unless there's going to be considerable open source like community support of the operator, in which case maybe that would change the story a little bit. So I'm not sure what the state of that is.
Well, the driver for upstreaming that into the Loki project was to allow building hopefully allowing to build a bigger community around it. Getting it in the project makes it more accessible for keeping track and merging PRs. Like the goal is to grow its adoption. And I do think, this is my opinion, I would rather maintain Go in an operator with a thin Helm wrapper than I would maintain a lot of complicated Helm charts. And the same for JSON as well, right? Like a thin JSON wrapper to deploy the operator versus a lot of JSON files. So it would be nice, if it's possible, if we can make this work, to use the operator to basically deprecate all the existing Helm charts and JSON it and replace them with very, very thin wrappers. Because we can't escape Helm, right? Like obviously tons of people use it. It needs to exist. Like that's the number one way people deploy in Kubernetes. We personally likely won't switch to Helm because of our massive JSON infrastructure. So if we can get to the point where we're all maintaining Go code and very little of the wrapping deployment of that with JSON and Helm, that sounds like a nice ideal scenario. I just, it's a lot of questions in the air still around that.
Yes, I guess that's where I would want community feedback. Like, how would the community feel about us? Because like, if we went this direction, I would want to deprecate all our Helm, right? And just say we have one Helm. It's the operator. It's the only thing we support. Like, it's the only thing that like we're going to contribute to going forward. How would the community feel about that?
Good question. I don't know the best way to solicit answers for that.
So what I definitely very hard
to go ahead, Christian. Sorry.
What I definitely recognized in a similar kind of Helm to operator conversion is basically where your Helm PRs become then suddenly Go code, and like kind of has a very huge barrier of entry in the sense that like I want to add this label, I want to add this annotation, and so on. And you can imagine that for a lot of fields in a lot of object types in Kubernetes. So that's definitely a bit of fear that I would have, that I think the complexity that's very, very similar. While at least in kind of JSON, I think you can patch whatever you want. In an operator, I guess we need to like maintain those fields ourselves and the code.
Yeah, I share a sort of a similar question with, I don't have much operator experience, but the API that it exposes is intentionally simple. And when I say API, it's basically the resource definition that is used by the controller to deploy it. It's intentionally simple, and it then therefore has the challenge that Helm has, which is if something that you want to do is not exposed already in that API, you have to PR the project. And we all have to agree we want that. And this is what Helm ends up, creating, is you like, I want to change the security context on the distributors, and nobody templated that. I have to open a PR for it and template it. JSON has the luxury of no such requirement, because you can manipulate anything anywhere at any time. Pros and cons to that for sure too. But the operator would be more Helm-like in that regard, which is it's, and for our own sanity, we probably would have to say no to some things people might want to do with it, right? Like they might want to do things and expose things through the API that maybe we don't want to do. I'm not really sure yet. Like I said, my expertise here is not the best.
So I definitely feel like maybe SEs have quite a bit of a better insight, because I think, like, when I think of some stories like adapt the Helm chart to OpenShift, which is kind of still very possible, I guess, without too much Go or programming skills. But when it comes to an operator, I think that will be requiring way more insight, I guess, into the operator itself. And so I think, like, it would be good getting, maybe if we don't manage to get external feedback, maybe, I don't know, like getting a bit more of an idea what SEs need to modify to make Loki work in particular environments.
I can say that the reason that Red Hat built an operator and the reason OpenShift uses operators is it's largely driven by being simple to deploy and run. Like, it's designed to hide a lot of the complexity. So if it's done well and it works, it should be easier. You know, I know opinions vary a lot on operators, and you know, what you tend to think maybe trade there is it might be easier to deploy and run, but you removed some of the knobs that would be easy to tune in something like JSON. Now, like, say I wanted to add a couple more distributors, like, there's not a knob for that currently. You know, you'd have to change the size of the cluster to be bigger. And so, you know, we run, like, our job is to run Loki, so we tend to, you know, tune it at that level, and that operator isn't built for that kind of control right now. So do we want to add that? But then when we add those controls, like Loki's config now has a control for everything, and it's a minefield, right? Like, of people able to change things that might have unintended consequences. So keeping the API simple is advantageous for a number of scenarios. So it's, I don't know. These are the kinds of things we got to figure out in the coming time. But you know, to Trevor's original point, we have a lot of Helm charts now, and that doesn't seem great. We got to figure out what we want to do to either reduce that number or just leave them be. I mean, if they're working for people, and you know, we can just keep merging PRs and.
Well, and I'm at sort of like there's a couple things that have come up. So there's like, there's sort of like a crossroads right now, is do I go create another one, right? Because we want to make SSD available to enterprise customers as well as open source customers. So open source users, right? So that's the first question. Then the second one is that if you look at our Helm charts, the sort of 3 or 4 that we have, they don't consistently follow the same patterns. Like, for example, some of them take the config as a string, and some of them take the config as a struct. And then the ones that take a config as the struct reach into that config to pull out values like ports to use for other places in the templates. Whereas the ones that take the config as a string hard code those ports in other places, or expose new top level variables for those ports. So it seems as though having a consistent vision, whether it be Helm, operator, whatever it is, would be the first step into deciding, you know, how to improve consistency, improve user experience across all of these different things.
Yeah. My personal opinion here is that I hope the operator can save us. I'd like this scenario to be, this is my opinion based on not a lot of time on this yet, but I'm hoping that allows us to focus everyone's efforts into maintaining the operator, and that it just choose your favorite wrapper to deploy it. Not sure yet how that's going to play out, because it's all sort of very new. But so we can sort of chat about that too, Trevor, on what we actually do in the next steps in the interim. Sure. I mean, I don't want to do something that would end up being kind of wasted effort, but you know, we want to also have people able to use the simple scalable deployment model, because it does make easier to run Loki at, you know, sort of moderate scales with a lot less complexity. So it may still be worth making a Helm chart, even if we know we're not going to keep it forever, because I don't think we're going to get to a point where the operator will be ready to cover all these use cases in the next like month or two. It's going to take longer than that, I suspect. So we might need a stopgap of solving the problem with another Helm chart.
Woohoo!
We never succeeded the holy grail of trying to use JSON to generate Helm charts, but I don't think anybody's ever been successful at that. So
I have found I deploy all when working on Helm. I deploy it all using JSON and Tonka because they're just things you can't do in Helm that I need done to like. And granted, like I think that my use case in development is different because I'm spinning up a whole world, right?
yeah,
With a Grafana and some like log generators and stuff too. But yeah, it's like I mean that's sort of what yeah. So anyways.
Yeah. Anybody have any other feedback or thoughts or opinions? We don't have a lot on the agenda, so we can talk about Helm the whole time if we want, but
Please let's not. I'm sorry, everyone. No one will like me anymore if that's what this meeting turns into.
So,
I
like,
did put a link
I
in
think-
there to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Christian.
Sorry again. Like I was thinking like what other opinions are on like that kind of simple scalable deployment, and how so like I'm definitely of the argument. I think if we don't run it ourselves somewhere where we care about kind of on a production level, then I think it will not get the kind of love that it needs, or we will not kind of discover the bugs. And obviously, like operationally, it will be quite challenging for us if we have to support like in SaaS kind of those different models. But I think that is probably the only way that we get a kind of similar quality, depending on which model you use. I don't know if that has been discussed recently. But...
So I actually have like, or I'm in the process of developing a plan for that exact issue, Christian. I'm still working on the design doc, and I'm unfortunately a little behind where I'd like to be. But yes, I would like for us to have a simple scalable pod in prod and to basically tee traffic off to it. So using something like I think in the gateway or something, there's some sort of like, I want to say it's like an Istio thing, or so I don't know, but it basically can like replicate traffic. And then similarly, we have the query T functionality that we could use on the query side. And so the idea would be, maybe going by tenant or something to control the load to some reasonable amount that, would not be prohibitively expensive and would also not be too big. But that way we can actually compare query results of the two different environments and make sure that so that we can stand by our statement, right, that it's production ready.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that either, because there isn't one, which is the way that we need to run Loki, or the way that we likely will run Loki, won't be how most people will, because most people aren't running multi-thousand tenant, many terabyte clusters, right? Like we offer a hosted service, and we have whereas like as an enterprise, you probably don't have that many tenants or have different size volumes, and we spend a lot of time tweaking, optimizing, and playing around and things that we want configurability for. SSD was designed to remove all of that because most people don't want that or need that, or at least we think. So yeah, what Trevor's suggesting, or Trevor's idea here that I like a lot, was we're going to take some portion of real traffic, mirror it in terms of reads and writes, and try to run it and validate. We're just going to have to try to do it in a way that we can sort of control our costs, because it's basically we're just doing it to validate other deployment modes. But the problem is there's a lot of ways to run Loki. There's a lot of like we want to cover the most common things and the things that we support when we do enterprise contracts and things that we help other people run. But at the end of the day, like as a community project, we always are going to rely on our community to help us find and fix bugs. for use cases that are hard for us to recreate. But yeah, I don't have a perfect solution for this, but I do like this one though. I like the idea of at least dedicating resources for some portion of traffic to do, accuracy, runtime, using like the tools that we run now, like the Loki Canary, to make sure that Loki does what it says it's supposed to do.
I think the other part to this too is like what I just said about leveraging the community, just getting it easier for people to start with SSD and then like telling us the point at which they had to switch over or something, right? Like, did you run SSD in a dev environment and it fell over there? And so then you were like, oh, well, we better go to microservices before we go to prod. Or like, were you able to get your SSD into prod, and at what volume did it fall over? Like, that sort of info is really valuable. And so I don't know if we need to maybe improve the channels of feedback or improve the tools to help people get started or what.
I'll put a link to where the operator lives in the Loki repo. There's some other links to documentation there. Definitely check that out. And yeah, come find us in the Loki Slack channel or on community.grafana.com if you have opinions on what you'd like to see about operators or Helm, or any feedback is well appreciated. Danny is not here, so the next thing is the timing of this call. We've talked about it a little bit before, but I think what we briefly discussed today is maybe running 2 calls every first week of the month, and have one in a time zone that's more accessible to the larger part, because like with a single call, there's certainly going to be time zones that this is inconvenient for. It's already inconvenient for most folks in the EU, so we at least want to make, so we got a lot of EU, both employees and workers. But if you go farther out to the APAC region, it's totally inaccessible right now. So I think what we'll just do is run 2 calls and just kind of cover the same information. So look for a new call or another time, or check out the YouTube channel if you want to catch up later.
Is there, like, if there's usually not very much content, would it not make more sense, at least to start, to just rotate one month, have it in North America friendly time, and the next month have it in Europe and Asia friendly time? That's at least what the Prometheus community call is, and it's been for quite a while.
Yeah, I don't have a huge opinion there. I think I'd prefer running 2 of them, because it basically just guarantees that most people can only attend once every 2 months. If you do them every other, since it's already like, so it just feels like that cadence would be like, although I'm anticipating for lots of folks to show up, and we need to do more to promote the call, which we're kind of like, yeah, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think my preference is slightly towards just running 2, and we don't have a lot to cover today, but it turns out I can just talk forever. So I don't know what they're gonna do in the other time zone, but yeah, I don't know. I think we should talk to our community folks within Grafana too, and see if they have preferences here. And I'm happy to do whatever the rough consensus of what folks would like to do is. Owen, you want to talk about this one?
Sure. Hiroki wrote a Loki book. It's very good. I haven't finished it yet, but I've read a lot of it already. We should even consider pulling this into as an official project if Hiroki's interested. Because I do think it's that good, and we're in pretty sore need of this type of thing. Turns out that all we had to do was say, eventually we'll write this for a year and a half, and then someone wrote it for us. So way to go, us.
Yeah, well, I'll cut us a little slack. What I really like about this is one of the things that's, my 3-year anniversary with Grafana and Loki is coming up soon, which is pretty incredible. But what that also has created is a scenario where I find myself like not very good at representing people that are new to the project or new to the, like, we hear the feedback. I know the documentation isn't as good as it, but I don't ever pull it up and then start from the beginning on how to deploy Loki because I know a bunch of stuff about Loki, it turns out. So what Hiroki's book is nice is it does tell the story as someone who started using Loki maybe about 6 months ago. And if you go to the part, the tips at the end, there's the failure stories. Well, that's a cool, like the book outlines itself well in terms of like talks about caching, like the things that he had to learn along the way that we don't document very well, that he filled in the gaps for, which is awesome because that turns out is hard for us to do sometimes, because at least for me personally, like when I learn a thing, I forget that I didn't know it at one point. And so if I didn't document it at the time, now it's just a thing that I knew that like I didn't remember, that was hard to figure out. So there's a lot we can pull out of this into our docs, or just link this from our docs and have Hiroki continue to do an awesome job of so an interesting sort of problem of like, when you're invested in a thing for as long as we've been working on it, it's a bit hard. It's just a good use case if you can't see the forest for the trees. I don't really like that analogy, so it doesn't, but I'll use it. So yeah, thanks to Hiroki, and also for a number of just fantastic contributions around the project lately. Yeah, definitely check it out. And similarly, like if you're new to Loki or you're using Loki and we get, a tremendous amount of contributions to the docs already that people fill in missing gaps, but let us know where the big holes are. We probably know already some of them, but sometimes things that seem obvious to us, we forget are not obvious to everybody else. All right. Dylan, you here, Dylan? You want to talk about Loki 2.4.2?
Yes, we are pretty close to release a new Loki version, mostly because of a few issues that we encountered in the past month. So it's good to be aware of that.
I think we'll probably do this very early next week. Just a patch fix on 2.4.1, but a couple things we pointed out in the community call last time, where some config issues that we'd like to enable to make sure that the parallelization works out of the box the way we wanted it to. There's a bug with the way common config is applied in a couple scenarios that we found. So largely to clean up stuff like that. So it will be worth upgrading to, if you're in the 2. Which everybody should be, 2.4. Always be at the latest. Loki only ever gets better with time, so I always recommend updating. Nice. That's all it's here. About anything else?
Let's close it.
Nice. Short and sweet. Well, welcome to the new year, everybody. I didn't get it done in time. I think I probably try to do it as a blog post of the issue that we created last year of what people want from Loki in 2021, which turned out to be well used. And we actually did a bunch of the stuff that was on there, and the community did a bunch of the stuff. So summarize that and then maybe create a new one of those for this year and see what we want Loki in, or for Loki in 2022. So thanks everybody. Have a wonderful day.